started. So welcome everybody. Thank you all for being here. Good afternoon, and thanks for joining us for an August edition of our summer sampler here, a lunch and learn that we're presenting in collaboration with the South Sound Business Magazine, and we're excited to be bringing you those free sessions over all of the summer to give you a little preview of our classes and to let you meet our most amazing and excellent instructors. I'm Hillary Ryan. I am the marketing manager for the University of Washington Tacoma Professional Development Center. I need to take a breath now. And if you're not familiar with us and this is your first encounter, welcome. We're glad that you're here. The Professional Development Center is a self-supporting unit, part of the University of Washington Tacoma, and we provide non-degree professional development programming, which range from short webinars to full certificates and customized training. And we're really excited that you're here today. Today's Lunch and Learn will run approximately an hour, and I'll turn it over to our amazing speaker in just a few minutes. Just a few quick housekeeping items. As I mentioned, mics are, actually I didn't mention, but your mics are turned off by default, and the chat is open for questions, and I'll be monitoring that throughout our day today. For questions and comments, we again will be recording the session and sending it out, as well as posting it on our website. And I've turned on the auto transcript for this session, and if you'd like to turn that off, you can click the closed caption icon on your Zoom toolbar and select hide subtitle. And with that, and with a room that is rapidly filling up, I will turn it over to Rebeka Jones, our speaker for today.
All right. Hello, everybody. I'm going to go into my introduction here shortly, but I want to do just one more plug here for the UW Tacoma Professional Development Center. So UW PDC has recently announced an exciting new professional development scholarship opportunity. And this is presented by Sekisui Aerospace. Sekisui Aerospace Emerging HR Professional Scholarship is actually going to provide $1,000 scholarships for 4 students in our PDC's Certificate of HR Management program. And the goal of the scholarship is to support professional growth in the HR profession, especially for students who are making a career change or who are early on in their HR career. As you may or may not know, professional development programs don't usually qualify for financial aid. So scholarships like these are an important way that we can expand access to these career building opportunities. And additionally, folks in this program, they'll receive mentorship and be making really great industry connections before or as they start transitioning into a new field, which can have enormous impact on your success. So if you were interested, or if you know someone who might be interested, applications for the Sekisui Emerging HR Professional Scholarship are open through August 31st. And interested applicants can complete an online application form, also to include a brief candidate statement. Priority will be given to applicants who are new to the HR field or making a career change, as well as to those applicants who are not receiving educational funding from their employer. So that was also a mouthful, but a very important one. So I hope that piques some interest from some of you, or that you can share that with some of your colleagues, friends, etc. All right. So as we've all sort of gotten used to over these last few years of the pandemic, being virtual, taking part in webinars such as this, I like to make an important point to humanize. Let's humanize the webinar. Let's recognize that, even though we're virtual and sitting behind our computer screens, that I'm not a robot, right? And neither are you. So humanizing myself, my name's Rebeka Jones, as Hillary said. Thank you, Hillary, for that introduction. And I'm one of the instructors at UW Tacoma's Professional Development Center. I teach a variety of courses in the HR program and also in the nonprofit development program. I'm also a senior HR consultant at a Seattle-based firm. And I've lived in the Pacific Northwest for about a decade with my husband, Matt, and we have a huge blended family of 7 kids, 1 grandson, 2 dogs, and a cat. So now you know a little bit about me. And while we don't have time, of course, for me to get to know each of you, unfortunately, I'd love it if you just took a quick second to answer a poll that's going to pop up on your screen here shortly. And it's just for me to understand a few things about you and, what size employer you might come from. So here it comes. Take a quick second and we'll see who's in the room. All right, give you one more second. All right, Hillary, will you be able to share results of the poll?
I think I can read them to you.
Yes, please
So
share.
let's see. It looks like we have, well, everybody's participating. That's wonderful. So the first question was, what career stage are you in? It looks like we have in the new to HR section, we have 6% of our folks. In the generalist to mid-career HR is 9%. Senior level HR is 21%. Not in HR, but I do all the HR things, 24, and then other is the 41%. So kind of with few people in every sort of section there.
Very good. Thank you so much for that.
Sure.
I think it's super important to note that whether you work in HR or not, you're obviously here for a very specific reason. And I think something that all of us have in common is that we work with other people. Even if you work for yourself, you still probably interact with people, whether you want to or not. So let's proceed into today's conversation. So as you know, the title of today's webinar, what does engagement have to do with employee relations? I'm wondering perhaps if when you saw this title, if you had that knowing HR feeling of understanding, yes, here and there, or if maybe you had a curiousness pop into your head, like, what do you mean engagement and employee relations are related? And either answer is okay, there's no wrong answer there. And the reason why, kind of what I just said a minute ago, is the fact that you were caught, your attention was caught by the title of this, or perhaps you pay attention to employee relations, or just that you're curious about employee engagement and whatever it has to do with employee relations. It means that you are interested in working on making a more pleasant workplace for everyone, including yourself, I hope, and to have a positive impact. The word engagement and retention and the Great Resignation, of course, are all buzzwords, that in the world of human resources, we've heard a lot about, especially in the last 2 years. And so instead of focusing on that newish term, the Great Resignation today, I really chose to start earlier on in the employee-employer relationship, right? So we're not going to talk about at that end of that relationship where the Great Resignation actually happens. We're going to talk about much sooner in the game, right? And talk about people in the workplace and what that looks like in lots of different scenarios. And so that is my goal for today, that hopefully you will walk away from this lunch hour with a better understanding of how to start towards making your workplace feel like a better place for all of your staff, again, yourself included, that you will feel inspired to take a positive approach, perhaps in a toxic work environment, or maybe that you'll feel empowered to start a conversation with some stakeholders on some changes that perhaps desperately need to take place in order to have a happier, healthier work environment for everybody. And I would just like to include that this is remote work, hybrid work, in-person work. It includes all of them. So let's start here. So I just want to define a few terms first, because I think that a lot of these words that I'll be using are sort of open to interpretation. They might mean something different at your organization. So as it relates to how I'm talking about them today, I'll just start by defining. So what is engagement really? Is it paying attention? Is it going to a meeting? Is it participating in an employee lunch, getting work done? Sure, it's all of those, right? But employee engagement is truly the nature of the relationship between an organization and its employees. So when employees are engaged, there's less turnover, there's greater productivity, heightened innovation. Imagine that. Let me just rewind and say that again, right? So when employees are engaged, there's less turnover, right? And what happens when employee relations are an issue at your organization? There's turnover, right? It's one way or the other. So we're saying that employee engagement is purely the organic relationship between an organization and its employees. Some relationships are bad, but some are really fantastic. And when they're good, that's when that magic happens at the organization, and you'll feel yourself and the organization start to thrive consistently. So we'll get back to that in a moment. But the employee engagement relationship can include all kinds of workplace interactions. And so, sorry if you can hear the honking outside my window. Hopefully it's being filtered out by Zoom. So this is a long but not inclusive list. So just some examples. It can include your day-to-day interactions between your manager and yourself. It can be how the organization communicates important organizational news and changes. It can include if the organization supports an open door policy, which, by the way, typically indicates either formally or informally that an organization's leadership is open to hearing general concerns or questions or ideas that the employees want to share. It can also include how the organization views and supports total compensation, pay, benefits, time off. It can include how the organization views and supports learning and development, which is both required training and future personal goals. And it can include how the organization's departments are aligned with the overall mission of the company. And so if employees feel as though they are being heard, either by their manager or through another source, such as an employee survey. So all of those things, all of those different sorts of workplace interactions can be an employee engagement relationship with your organization. So what is workplace culture? I'm sure you probably all heard this term before, culture, and maybe you've used it. Maybe you use it every day in what you're talking about with your work. But workplace culture is employee engagement, right? It's really, it's the climate of a staff, a temperature gauge, if you will, and how their engagement affects the workplace environment. So how the staff and the organizational leadership interact, whether or not there's trust between them, and the work life that this creates, sometimes strong and sometimes challenging. It's what creates an environment known as the workplace culture. Notably, though, workplace culture will often create itself, depending on what's happening and perhaps unintentionally. But a workplace culture will present no matter if it's fabulous or if it's toxic. So to talk a little bit more about the makeup of a workplace culture, first some characteristics and then some traits, okay? So here's some characteristics that will readily distinguish an organizational culture. Values, okay? Values that are emphasized by the leadership of an organization. There's no right or wrong answer here. It's just a fact that values that are displayed and or talked about will eventually become the heart of an organization, both good and bad. Also a big culture characteristic is the degree of hierarchy, which is really the extent of which the organization values levels of authority. I'm sure you're probably familiar with chain of command, terms like that. And then there's also degree of urgency. So degree of urgency tells us how quickly an organization wants or needs to make decisions. And while creating a perfect culture really has no real recipe, a great culture truly is a mixture of time, patience, and the values that the leadership actually live by. So now let me talk about those culture traits. So there's three specific culture traits that are identified as part of a workplace culture typically. And these would include social culture, referring to sort of the roles and membership of a workplace culture, if you will, employees from all departments, whether they want to be part of that culture or not. Also material culture, and that's the recognition of how the organization values achievement or how the employees support each other. And then lastly is the ideological culture. And this is really just the fundamental views that guides this group's existence. And by group, I just want to emphasize that sometimes you have a core group within your organization that just sort of monopolizes the culture. And it's not necessarily the group that you would want to represent your organization, but they're the group that has become the social butterflies. They're the group that is outspoken. They're the group that want to be heard and have a right to be heard, right? But so often this particular trait of ideological culture are the thoughts and views of that group's existence that makes its presence known. So now let me discuss some examples of workplace culture and how they really have such a strong impact on employee engagement. So let me start out with some less desirable cultures, and I'll give you just some quick descriptive examples so you can make your own visuals in your head. Or maybe these are going to be very real for you and you won't have to make visuals in your head. Okay, so let's start off. You have an employee who has never been late and always completes their work before deadlines. You find that this employee has been overlooked when a colleague in the same position is promoted to a lead role. This employee was never asked if they were interested in this promotion, and now they feel devalued and unmotivated to do their work. Less desirable culture. Second example is a new procedure is being implemented at your work, but the staff do not understand why the old procedure was changed, and no one in leadership took the time to explain the reason for the change, creating frustration and less engagement among the team. Sound familiar? So in both of these examples, you can see that the trend here is just the lack of communication or inconsistent communication at best. All right, and so some examples of a more desirable culture. The first one, a sales team meets and exceeds their sales goal for the quarter, and the manager takes the time to recognize each person's contribution on the team instead of taking the accolades for himself. He continues to keep them motivated by genuine appreciation and ensures that there is communication between the team, the rest of the company, and their department. And lastly, a company implements a short employee survey where they seek to find out what is more important to staff, a change in medical benefits options, or an additional paid holiday. After seeking the information, the company acts swiftly with the results and communicates the findings. The employees overwhelmingly chose an additional paid holiday, with 90% of them in agreement. This is implemented quickly, in addition to an annual cost of living increase, showing the staff that their needs and wants are relevant and important to their employer. So in a clear contrast from our first two examples, our second two examples show several ways of communicating to staff. One through recognition, and two through a survey and solution action. And yes, our examples might seem like opposite ends of the spectrum. Maybe we're talking about extremes, but so often when it comes to communication within organizations, there is no middle ground. It either exists or it doesn't. So I'm sure one or all of these sound familiar, and maybe you've experienced one of these scenarios, good or bad, from the employee perspective, and not just the HR side. The important takeaway here is that the workplace culture is directly affected by employee engagement, and the display of employee engagement is a result of the workplace culture. So they're pretty tied together. Okay, so what is employee relations? So many things, but typically you'll find your human resources department referring to matters of concern, conflict, suffering work culture, and union matters, all under this umbrella term of employee relations. Employee relations refers to an organization's overall efforts to create and maintain a positive relationship with its employees. So you can see the difference here where HR is usually referring to conflicts, issues, matters that they want to take care of. But employee relations is really about the overall effort, right? So by maintaining positive and constructive employee relations, organizations can at least hope to keep employees loyal and more engaged in their work. Now, having peaceful employee relations is one thing, but having a strategy to maintain employee relations is another, which leads us to another side topic that we'll get to shortly. Employee relations can be recognized as everything from, and this is a non-inclusive list, just another list of examples, addressing tension among staff, helping to address confusion over a new policy, acknowledging and communicating cost of living wage increases, being an investigatory lead for complaints, being the company representative for a union disagreement, as well as everything done to maintain the employee morale, much of which is affected when the examples I just mentioned are not addressed in a timely manner. So consider how staff would feel when their supervisor does not address perhaps a rude employee who bullies much of the staff. They've repeatedly gone to their supervisor who doesn't prioritize the issue and subsequently has several employees quit from their team, all because of the terrible morale from not handling the issue promptly. You'll find that every example I just gave, while many of them might not seem like issues that were a big deal, every issue becomes a big deal to staff when they feel as though their concerns are not important enough for their supervisor or for HR to address it in a timely manner. So what might have originally just been a question turns into an enraged employee who doesn't feel important and then quits. Happens all too often. So who is responsible for employee relations? We will go to the next slide and we will discuss where this responsibility lies. Okay. Excuse me. So this is a question that finds lots of folks pointing in a direction away from themselves or just not agreeing who is involved, who isn't involved. It's just so common. But my answer is that it starts at the top, like any major priority does within an organization. And if the people of an organization are prioritized in all ways, then the next level will follow and the managers will follow and all the staff will just benefit. It really is a win-win, but I realize it's not that simple. Have you ever had a manager in your past work experience who was the best? Everything they did just felt wonderful. They were a role model. They listened. They dealt with issues so you didn't have to. And then one day they just left and you felt heartbroken because your new manager was the complete opposite, different style, different ways. And I remember the first time that I experienced this, and I didn't realize until many years later that the reason why they had likely left their job with no notice to their team is because they were fed up and they had enough class that they didn't let that trickle down to the rest of their team. Maybe they weren't paid enough. Maybe they could see that leadership didn't care about the things that they cared about, which was making their team's work environment pleasant, which unfortunately was to the detriment of their own experience. This example is what happens when people are not prioritized and they start to feel burned out. And I know that this is a term that since the pandemic began, unfortunately, most everyone is familiar with, as we've all experienced burnout of our jobs simply as a side effect, right, of pandemic fatigue. But burnout on the job is preventable, but only if employee relations, work culture, and engagement have a precedent with leadership and everyone makes it their responsibility. So as I've already shared, I'm a very visual person. And this slide here, this helps me tie all of these terms together. And so it's easy to just quickly recognize how one trickles down and affects the next. And if you've got ongoing or unmanaged employee relations issues, your workplace culture, unfortunately, probably won't be great. And if the workplace culture isn't great, then your staff likely isn't engaged well with their work, which makes them less interested and less productive in what they're doing. And after defining those three terms, I'm sure that each of you are probably visualizing in your heads, what each of those terms looks like at your organization. And so while I'm hoping great, I'm also a fair realist. And if you're here today, you've either got maybe some ongoing issues with one of these three things, or you're looking to figure out how to maintain. And so we all have areas of engagement that we need to work on. So as you are all thinking about how your organization fares, I want you to consider some of these following questions as well. So close your eyes if you need to, meditate, find a good space. So I want you to consider, has the leadership of your organization acknowledged the engagement challenges that you see? Are you on the same page with leadership about the prioritization of any employee relations issues? Do you find that they're open for suggestions? Do you find that they're open for change? Are you feeling unsure of where to start? Are you feeling deflated by your staff population because of the constant negativity? Or is the negativity funneling downward from leadership? So that's a big list of questions, a lot of which takes lots of time, lots of energy, and lots of commitment to get turned around. Well, I just want you to know that I see you. And you are also an employee, and you also deserve a workplace that you enjoy being in. So let's talk about that big what next. Assessing the organization. So let's discuss this from three different situational HR perspectives, one of which will likely apply to you. So the first HR perspective is maybe you're here because you've been in your organization for a long time. You know the history, you know the context that's led to the employee engagement being at this low point that it's at now. The leadership is bitter and exhausted from all of the employee issues that kind of seem to keep bulldozing HR, and you're at your wit's end because no one will commit to a major change. That's our first perspective. Second one is that you're new to your HR role in the organization. You've become aware in a short amount of time that lots of staff are not happy, and they've let you know already that they don't really trust you because you must be siding with their leadership. And then my third perspective is you've been the HR during a CEO gap, and you've watched your staff go from happy to sad. They watched their previous CEO leave, which they loved, and now they are untrusting of the future. So obviously, each of these scenarios are very difficult in different ways, and they should be handled differently. However, assessing the organization is something that you can and should do, no matter if you're brand new to the organization or if you've been there for years, as it can bring a current and updated clarity to what and where the issues of the organization exist. And so this clarity that you can get from assessing your organization is going to come from listening to staff. Whether that is doing an employee survey, holding where listening open forums, walking around and just starting conversations with staff, or by reminding all what the open door policy is if you have one. All of these methods will hopefully provide you with details of the problems from staff that staff have with the organization, and you'll be able to establish what is really bothering them. If they take the opportunity to speak up, I know that you'll be ready to listen. You'll be able to glean information from them, and you'll be able to share with leadership your findings. And maybe you'll be able to easily answer some of the things for staff that they thought were issues, but you provide them with a better understanding, eliminating their problem quickly. Now, hopefully any actions taken will come from a mutual effort of brainstorming between staff and leadership. Actions taken will ideally lead to turning over a new leaf. Then comes the maintenance of workplace culture and the long-term actions. Hillary, sorry to interrupt. Can I just get a quick thumbs up? Am I fading out? I just got an unstable internet connection notice.
No, you are doing fine.
Okay.
For me, yep.
Okay, thank you. Just wanted to check. Okay. But if staff do not feel trusting in the methods that you're offering them, whether that's survey or conversation, there may be some trust building that must happen first before they will share thoughts with you. And as you might be aware, trust building can be the longest part of any solution. It doesn't mean, though, that there still shouldn't be a plan. Leadership should still be brainstorming and should get behind ways to consistently work at gaining trust with staff. You need to look for low-hanging fruit in these situations and have leadership be more present. Talking is free. Spending time with staff and seeing them do what they do will show them that you are interested. It will take away that ivory tower myth of leadership and hopefully open the doors to understanding your staff population better in the end. So whether you get the information you need from staff quickly, or if it takes a while, it's noteworthy to remember that employee relations and workplace culture typically have short-term problems and long-term issues that need attending to. Both should be incorporated into an action plan and then a strategy to help maintain going forward. So how might you build trust, you ask? Because man, building trust when it's gone, I'm sure you all know this, whether it's from personal reasons or professional, it's a tough one. But sometimes the most powerful approach when you are attempting to earn trust or gain it back is to just actively listen. Listen to whatever folks have to say. Let them know that you are listening and that you are interested in gathering their thoughts. You know, really that you want to find a way forward with their input. Additionally, accepting responsibility, whether it's for something valid that they take issue with, you know, maybe you forgot to follow up, it happens, or you were really delayed in responding to them. Just acknowledging that can oftentimes validate their frustration. Responding to questions when asked and not delaying, connecting somebody with the right person to address their need, and following up when you say you're going to. All of these can earn you valuable deposits in the trust bucket. And this trust bucket that I refer to, it's a wonderful metaphor that a previous director of mine always used. And it was just the right visual that I needed to recognize how interactions with staff could earn some and lose some, right? And if I lost some deposits in that trust bucket, how was I going to earn them back, right? What was I going to do? What was I going to commit to continue working on building that trust? It was part of keeping a forward-thinking strategy and plan. So employee relations really just couldn't escape from my grasp. Another visual for you. It bears repeating with this visual. You know, when you have current employee relations, workplace culture, and engagement issues, start by assessing the staff population. Will they talk so that you can listen? What will work best for your industry and your staff? And do they trust you? Next, listen, listen, listen. Share with leadership how to actively listen and ask them to be present around your staff. Communicate your findings, your action plans, and regular company news and changes. It will keep your trust factor current. And then finally, strategies for the future, which is what we're going to talk about next, all the strategies.
Rebeka,
Yes,
Before we go on, we had a good question, I think, and before you move on to the next topic.
sure.
What if the staff trust you, but they don't trust the organization?
That is a completely relevant and very common situation. What I would say is take advantage of that trust in that you want to listen and glean as much information from folks as you can. I would encourage you not to get in between, not to enforce any of the bad things that they feel or say about the organization, but really just put out there that you are interested in why. You know, why do they feel bad things about the organization or the leadership? What led them to that point? Has this happened before? You know, is this a trend? Ask them perhaps what they might consider a solution to be. You know, is there a way forward? Can you help facilitate an open forum or a group meeting, or small meetings, you know, with someone in particular in leadership? You want it to be, you want it to be a beneficial relationship with these staff that trust you, but also you want to have them participate in the solutions along with you, right? So you want to help get them there to that place where they're, once they've let everything off their chest, they're joining you in that solution making process. So, and that's where the importance of you comes into play, where you're going to be the one who can help facilitate some of those solutions to happen. I hope that helped. And thank you, Hillary, because I can't see the chat screen on with my viewpoint right now. Okay, so back to strategies. So we all know that organizations have goals to meet, whether that's operational and financial, maybe a mission to accomplish, objectives that are prioritized, all of which that are generally filtered down from a leadership operation to the general staff who help to take on these goals, missions, and objectives. Sometimes the HR department and other support departments, they have a sub-goal. This takes the organization's goals into consideration and has a departmental level strategy to help support. This is referred to in HR as a people strategy. So this can be an effective way of communicating to all, not just the HR department, you know, and how they're going to support, but communicating to the rest of the organization that the people of the organization are valuable, right? It can be a reminder that operations wouldn't function and goals wouldn't be met and missions won't be accomplished without these people. And so the people strategy is thought of as a way that you think about and set into motion ways to attract people, develop people, retain people, and really generally inspire your workforce overall. People strategies can include various focus areas depending on where the concentration is needed, such as retention, engagement, recognition, learning and development, culture management action plans, compensation strategies, and compliance strategies. So I'm sure you noticed that that basically covers all of the areas of HR, and HR does a lot in one department. And in each of these various strategies, the meat of it will discuss the who, what, where, when, why, and hows, right? So it should be clear what the goal is in the strategy and what needs to be accomplished and how it will get done, right? So you guys might have looked at the title on this slide and said, okay, strategy, but how do I write it, right? It's just the meat. The strategy is who and what and where and when and how and why. So think of it like that. So let's talk about what kinds of strategies could be useful in just a couple of situations. So my first one is that your company's operations director comes to you, the HR manager, and wants to know why they still have 12 positions open at 4 of their stores. You quickly share with them that these 4 stores do not follow through on scheduling interviews with the candidates that are sent to them. And of the interviews that are scheduled, it always seems to be the same assistant managers that are doing the hiring for the whole store. The operations director says that they will speak with the store managers to understand why this is happening. and come to find out that many of the assistant managers hired in the last year have never been trained on the company's hiring process or had interview training. So simply, they were leaving it to the ones that knew how to do it, putting those stores behind in their hiring. And while you are embarrassed that your department may have failed in scheduling training with these managers, you offer to put together a talent strategy, which will combine thorough training of the assistant managers on the process and interviewing, along with providing some reinforced efforts in supporting some mass hiring, some HR support to interview higher volumes of people. You and the operations director decide to keep the training portion of the talent strategy in place for all new management hires going forward. Sounds like a lovely scenario. All right, and my second one, an IT firm that works 100% remote has found that its staff feels disconnected from the organization and its coworkers. Not at all uncommon since the pandemic. Some shared that they find that even their extra projects aren't recognized, and they are starting to feel like a robot that works for a robot. The CEO works with their people director to come up with a combination engagement and recognition strategy where they invest in a new platform for communication and recognition amongst all staff, to be led by the CEO himself. The people director asks for volunteers from all departments to join an engagement committee to come up with some relevant and different ways that staff can interact together, even if virtually, to get to know one another, which helped get a group immediately re-engaged with each other. So really though, you can't go wrong with a people strategy that reinforces an organization's commitment to an engagement strategy through recognition and development, or a retention strategy focused on training. Your strategy should provide not just you and leadership direction, but it will show your employee population of the continued devotion to adjust how things are done if something isn't working. All right, an isolated issue versus a trend. So does an isolated issue need a strategy too? Well, if the people in your organization are happy, I'd recommend just finding ways to keep them happy, right? Strategies are not only about correcting something that went wrong or fixing an issue, but about maintaining that workplace culture that we spoke about before. An ongoing people strategy, it's a common and effective way to ensure that leadership continue to keep people a top priority. And everything from compensation to recognition to training and development, all relevant things that people care about and things that they often ask about upon a job offer. All right, so when it's isolated events that turn more frequent, that can be cause for concern. And if you start to see trends in the issues that that are routinely coming to HR, or trends of employee relations issues that are always, seems like they're always something that sneaks up on you, which is why maintaining some sort of consistent people strategy will hopefully address some of those isolated issues that turned into trends before they make it that far. Oops. Okay. Oh my gosh. I'm scrolling my little rolly thing on my mouse a little bit too much. So I don't want to skip this slide. Be kind to yourself. I'm a big fan of wanting to acknowledge that HR does some hard work. Even if you are not sitting in a direct HR position and you're just filling in the HR stuff, like maybe you work in finance, maybe you work in another support department, and HR responsibilities are just sort of thrust on you. It's hard work. HR supports staff, we support leadership, we cover multiple areas under one department, we prioritize staff, and we make ourselves available in what might be an endless day sometimes. We recognize burnout in others, and we don't always recognize it in ourselves. So I want to encourage you to look out for your fellow colleagues in HR, recognize their burnout, support your HR team, and seek support through your community HR, whether that's through SHRM or another organization. It's also okay to not be okay. I don't want to steal anyone's term, but I feel like it's just so relevant and can never be said quite enough. HR by default sort of becomes a pseudo counselor or therapist in lots of situations where employees need to be heard, even if it's not about professional things. And folks in HR often take on far more deep personal things than they may be equipped professionally or personally for. So you need to know when to ask for help, speak up to your boss, and step back when you need to. Caring professions require that you maintain your own personal boundaries so that you can remain present and well to do the work. Take a break when you need it. But better yet, take a break when you don't. And we'll just call that your no burnout strategy. Thank you, guys.
Well, thank you so much, Rebecca. That's great. I definitely learned a whole lot there. It's definitely a perspective that I haven't thought through, and it's interesting to see how you think about layering, how those are all sort of layered on top of each other. So yeah, we do have some time for questions or comments. You can throw it in the chat, and I will read it out. And then I will be shortly launching a poll to get your feedback about the webinar. So it looks like we have one question that just came in. Person was late. The recording, yes, the recording will be sent out. We will be able to send that out to folks sometime tomorrow. It will be sent to both the folks who have joined, who've signed, anybody who signed up for this session will be able to get a copy of that. So we'll have that available. Any other questions for Rebecca while we have her here?
I'll also just throw out there that I'm very active on LinkedIn. Happy to connect with anybody on LinkedIn if you would like another person in your LinkedIn community. Often posting positions for clients of mine through my organization, and also posting things for UW-Tacoma and things like this when they come up available. So. All right, I see the webinar poll has just popped up on your screen. If you wouldn't mind sharing your feedback for me today. And I just want to thank you for joining me in the summer series. Hope to see you again in this format or anywhere else at UW-Tacoma soon.